The crack of a pistol shot split the dawn silence as Bethany Crawford dove behind an overturned water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs. Dust swirled around her while the bullet splintered with just inches from her head. She had 15 minutes to clear out of Willow Creek, and Sheriff Daniels was making sure she understood the deadline wasn't negotiable. "That was your warning shot, Crawford," the sheriff bellowed from across the street. "Next one won't miss." No place in this town for a woman who can't keep her place. Bethany peered over the edge of the trough, her green eyes narrowed with determination. At 23, she'd spent her entire life in Willow Creek, Colorado. The year was 1878, and being the daughter of the town's former schoolteacher had earned her nothing but scorn since her father died 2 years ago. She tried to take his place, but the town council had other ideas. "I've done nothing wrong," she shouted back, her fingers digging into the rough wood. "Stirring up trouble is wrong enough." Sheriff Daniels adjusted his gun belt. "Teaching those Mexican children to read after the council told you not to. Arguing with the mayor about women's rights. You're nothing but trouble, girl." Bethany's blood boiled. The council had replaced her with a man who could barely spell his own name, but charged the immigrant families double for their children's education. When she'd started offering free lessons, they'd labeled her a troublemaker. "You have until sundown to be gone," the sheriff continued, holstering his weapon. "Or I'll have you in a cell for disturbing the peace." Bethany watched him saunter away, her mind racing. Everything she owned was in the small room above the general store, a room she'd just been evicted from. She had nowhere to go, no family left, and precisely $2.43 to her name. She dusted off her plain blue dress and straightened her shoulders. Perhaps it was time to leave Willow Creek behind. She'd heard there were opportunities for schoolteachers in the growing settlements further west. With nothing left to lose, she made her decision. 3 hours later, Bethany stood at the edge of town, clutching a small carpet bag containing her meager possessions. She'd sold her father's pocket watch to buy a ticket on the next westbound stagecoach, due to arrive within the hour. The morning sun beat down on her exposed neck as she waited, alone on the weathered wooden platform. The rumble of approaching hooves caught her attention, but it wasn't the stagecoach. Instead, a lone rider approached on a magnificent chestnut stallion. Bethany's breath caught as the man drew nearer. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders wrapped in a worn leather duster. A well-used Stetson shaded his face, but she could make out a strong jawline beneath several days' worth of stubble. The stranger pulled his horse to a stop beside the platform, his piercing blue eyes assessing her with curiosity. "Waiting for the stage, madam." His voice was deep, like distant thunder over the plains. "Yes," Bethany replied cautiously. She'd learned not to trust too easily, especially when it came to men with guns, and this one had a revolver strapped to his hip. "Where you headed?" he asked, removing his hat to reveal thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. He couldn't have been more than 27. Bethany hesitated. "Wherever the stage is going, I suppose." A slight smile curved his lips. "That's not much of a plan." "It's the only one I have at the moment," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion and tied his horse to the hitching post. "The name's Luke Reynolds," he said, extending his hand. Bethany regarded his outstretched palm with suspicion before briefly accepting it. "Bethany Crawford." "You're running from something, Miss Crawford," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I'm simply seeking better opportunities elsewhere," she replied stiffly. Luke's eyes drifted to the bruise forming on her forearm where the sheriff had grabbed her earlier that morning. Those opportunities wouldn't happen to include getting away from whoever did that, would they? Bethany pulled her sleeve down quickly. "It's none of your concern, Mr. Reynolds." Before Luke could respond, the distant sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of town. Luke's hand immediately went to his revolver as he scanned the horizon. "That's no target practice," he muttered, his expression darkening. The gunfire intensified, followed by shouting. Luke turned to Bethany, his eyes serious. "Stay here." "I most certainly will not," she protested, gathering her skirts. "That's coming from near the schoolhouse. There are children there." Luke looked like he wanted to argue, but instead nodded curtly. "Stay behind me." They hurried toward the commotion, Luke's long strides forcing Bethany to nearly run to keep up. As they rounded the corner toward the schoolhouse, the scene before them froze Bethany's blood. 3 men on horseback were firing into the air while a group of children, mostly from the Mexican families who worked the nearby ranches, cowered against the schoolhouse wall. The new schoolteacher lay unconscious on the ground, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "Get back on your side of town," one of the riders shouted at the terrified children. "School's not for your kind." Bethany recognized him immediately. Harold Thompson, the mayor's son. His companions were local ranch hands known for their meanness and quick tempers. "Those men are drunk," Luke whispered, his voice tight with anger. "They're always drunk," Bethany replied grimly. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, ignoring Luke's attempt to hold her back. "Thompson," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady, "leave those children alone." Harold whirled his horse around, nearly losing his seat. His face contorted with rage when he recognized her. "Crawford, thought the sheriff ran you out of town." "Clearly not far enough," she replied. "Now leave these children be. They have every right to be here." Harold spat on the ground. "You never did learn your place, did you? Always sticking up for these worthless." "That's enough," Luke interrupted, stepping forward. His hand rested casually on his revolver, but there was nothing casual about his stance or the cold look in his eyes. Harold's gaze shifted to Luke, sizing him up. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate seeing children frightened by cowards on horseback," Luke replied evenly. One of Harold's companions drew his pistol, but Luke was faster. In a blur of motion, he drew and fired, the bullet knocking the man's gun from his hand. The injured man howled in pain, clutching his bleeding fingers. "Next one won't be so merciful," Luke warned, his gun still raised, Harold's face flushed with fury and embarrassment. "This isn't over," he snarled, wheeling his horse around. "You just made a powerful enemy, stranger." With that, he and his companions galloped away, dragging their injured friend with them. As soon as they were gone, Bethany rushed to the children, speaking soothingly in a mixture of English and Spanish. Luke checked on the schoolteacher, helping the dazed man to his feet. "You need to get these children home," Luke told Bethany after the schoolteacher stumbled away, muttering about resigning his position. "I know," she said, her face pale but determined. "I'll take them." "I'll come with you," Luke offered, holstering his weapon. They spent the next hour escorting the children to their homes in the small collection of adobe buildings on the outskirts of town. The grateful parents invited them in for meals, but Bethany politely declined, knowing they had little to spare. As they walked back toward town, Luke broke the silence. "You taught these children, didn't you?" Bethany nodded. "Until the town council decided I was unfit for the position. Because you taught everyone who wanted to learn. Because I'm a woman who doesn't know her place," she said bitterly. "Because I believe everyone deserves education, regardless of where they come from or how much money they have." Luke studied her face. "That's why you're leaving." "I've been officially banished," she admitted. "Sheriff gave me until sundown." They reached the stage platform again, but the stage coach hadn't arrived. Luke leaned against a post, crossing his arms. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," Bethany confessed. I heard Silverdale is looking for a teacher. Luke's expression changed. Silverdale, I know it well. It's where I'm headed, actually. You are. Bethany couldn't hide her surprise. I own a cattle ranch about 10 miles outside town, he explained. Just returning from selling a herd in Denver. Bethany regarded him with renewed curiosity. This man was no drifter but a successful rancher. What brings you through Willow Creek? It's hardly on the way from Denver to Silverdale. A shadow crossed Luke's face. Personal business. Before Bethany could inquire further, the station master approached them. Stage won't be coming today, Miss Crawford, he announced, not looking directly at her. Broken axle about 20 miles back. Won't be another for 3 days. Bethany's heart sank. She couldn't stay in Willow Creek for 3 more days. The sheriff would make good on his threat. I see, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Thank you for informing me. The station master shuffled away, leaving Bethany staring at the empty road ahead. She blinked rapidly, refusing to give in to tears of frustration. I'm riding to Silverdale, Luke said quietly. You're welcome to come along. Bethany's head snapped up. With you, alone. It's 3 days' ride, he continued, ignoring her scandalized tone. We'd make camp each night, I understand if that's not proper, but it seems like your options are limited. Bethany weighed her choices. Staying meant jail. Traveling alone on foot was dangerous. Going with Luke Reynolds was improper by any social standard, but he had just defended children at risk to himself. Why would you help me? She asked directly. You don't know me. Luke met her gaze steadily. I know enough. I know you stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Something in his eyes told Bethany he understood that cost all too well. If I accept, you should know I have very little money to contribute. I'm not asking for money, Luke replied. Just company on the trail. Bethany took a deep breath and nodded. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Reynolds. Luke, he corrected. If we're traveling together, you might as well use my first name. Luke, she repeated softly. They collected her ticket refund from the reluctant station master and gathered supplies from the general store. The shopkeeper's wife, Martha, had always been kind to Bethany and slipped extra food into their packages when her husband wasn't looking. You be careful, Martha whispered. Reynolds has a reputation as a gunslinger from his younger days. Bethany glanced out the window where Luke was adjusting his saddle. He seems honorable enough. Martha patted her hand. Just mind yourself. A woman traveling alone with a man invites talk. People will talk about me regardless, Bethany replied with a sad smile. They already do. They departed Willow Creek as the sun began its descent, Bethany seated behind Luke on his stallion. Her carpet bag was secured behind the saddle, along with their supplies. Luke had purchased a bedroll for her with his own money, waving away her protests. Sheriff Daniels was watching us from his office, Bethany said as they crested a hill overlooking the town. He seemed afraid. Luke's back stiffened against her. Daniels and I have history. What kind of history? Luke was silent for so long that Bethany thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, the kind that's better left in the past. They rode until dusk, making camp beside a small creek. Luke efficiently gathered wood and built a fire while Bethany prepared a simple meal of beans and salt pork. They ate in companionable silence, the crackling fire and singing crickets the only sounds in the gathering darkness. You're good with a gun, Bethany observed, breaking the silence. But you don't seem like the typical gunslinger. Luke prodded the fire with a stick. I learned to shoot out of necessity, not desire. And now you're a rancher, he nodded. 5 years now, built it from nothing. That's impressive, Bethany said sincerely. Most men in these parts inherit their land or steal it. Luke's mouth quirked in a half smile. I worked as a ranch hand for years, saved every penny, bought the land when no one else wanted it. Why didn't they want it? No water, he replied. Everyone said it was useless land. But I found an underground spring, dug wells. Now it's some of the most productive grazing land in the territory. Bethany smiled. You proved them wrong. Luke's eyes met hers across the fire, something warm flickering in their depths. I've spent most of my life proving people wrong about me. The next morning, they broke camp at dawn. As Bethany helped Luke pack up their supplies, she noticed a faded wanted poster in his saddlebag. Before she could make out the details, Luke quickly folded it and tucked it away. What's that? She asked. Part of that personal business I mentioned, he replied tersely. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. They rode harder that day, Luke frequently checking the horizon behind them. By mid-afternoon, Bethany's body ached from hours in the saddle, but she didn't complain. When they stopped to rest the horse by a small stream, she finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been bothering her. Are we being followed? Luke's expression remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. Possibly. By whom? Sheriff Daniels, maybe, or someone working for him. Bethany frowned. Because of me. No, Luke said firmly, because of me, because he recognized me, and that's bad because. Luke sighed, rubbing his hand across his jaw. Because 5 years ago I was wanted in 3 territories. Daniels tried to bring me in once. It didn't go well for him. Bethany's eyes widened. You're an outlaw. I was, Luke corrected. I was young, angry, running with a bad crowd after my parents were killed by raiders. Did things I'm not proud of. His gaze held her steadily. But I've paid for my mistakes. Served time, got a pardon. I'm legal now. Then why are you worried about Daniels? Because he doesn't care about legal, Luke said grimly. He cares about revenge. I humiliated him, left him tied to a tree in his underwear when he tried to ambush me. Despite herself, Bethany laughed at the image and Luke's expression softened. You're not afraid of me now, she considered this. Should I be? Most would say yes. Bethany shook her head. I've learned not to judge people by what others say about them. People said I was useless too, remember? Something shifted in Luke's eyes as he regarded her. You're unlike any woman I've ever met, Bethany Crawford. They continued their journey, making better time than expected. That night, as they made camp in a sheltered grove, Luke taught Bethany how to shoot his spare revolver. You need to know how to defend yourself, he insisted when she initially refused. Especially if you're going to live out west. Reluctantly, Bethany allowed him to position her arms, his chest warm against her back as he showed her how to aim. Her first shot went wild, but by the 5th attempt, she was hitting the makeshift target with reasonable accuracy. You're a natural, Luke said approvingly. Bethany lowered the gun, surprised by the sense of accomplishment she felt. My father would be horrified. He believed violence was never the answer. And what do you believe? Luke asked. She thought for a moment. I believe in standing up for what's right. Sometimes that requires force. Luke nodded, his expression thoughtful. Your father sounds like a good man. He was, Bethany said softly. He taught me that education is the great equalizer. That's why I fought so hard to teach everyone in Willow Creek. She sighed, staring into the fire. They called me troublemaker, rabble-rouser, useless. Said a woman had no business trying to change things. Luke sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. They called me useless too, you know, when I bought that land. Said I was throwing away good money on dead earth. Bethany turned to him. Then watch me prove them wrong, she quoted softly. Exactly. His voice was barely above a whisper, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. In that moment, something shifted between them. Bethany became acutely aware of his proximity, of the way his eyes lingered on her face. She looked away first, her cheeks warming. "We should get some rest," she said, her voice unsteady. "Long day tomorrow." Luke cleared his throat. "You're right, I'll take first watch." "Do you really think that's necessary?" "Better safe than sorry," he replied, his expression serious once more. Bethany settled into her bedroll, watching as Luke positioned himself against a tree, rifle across his knees. Despite the potential danger, she felt safer than she had in years. The next day dawned clear and bright. They made good progress through rolling hills that gradually gave way to more rugged terrain. By midday, Luke announced they were entering his land. "Already?" Bethany was surprised. "I thought we were still a day's ride from Silverdale." "My property extends far," Luke explained with quiet pride. "Nearly 15,000 acres." Bethany was impressed. For a man so young to have acquired so much was remarkable. "How many cattle do you run?" "About 2,000 head," he replied. "And I'm breeding horses now, too." As they crested a hill, Luke suddenly tensed, pulling the horse to a stop. In the distance, a plume of smoke rose against the blue sky. "That's coming from the direction of my ranch house," he said, his voice tight with concern. Without warning, he spurred the horse into a gallop. Bethany clung to his waist as they raced across the open grassland, the wind whipping her hair free from its pins. They rode hard for nearly an hour before the source of the smoke came into view. It wasn't the ranch house, but a line shack that was ablaze. 3 men on horseback were circling the burning structure, shouting and firing shots into the air. Even from a distance, Bethany recognized Sheriff Daniels' distinctive gray hat. Luke reined the horse to a stop behind a rocky outcropping. "Stay here," he ordered, helping Bethany dismount. "What are you going to do?" she asked, grabbing his arm. "And this," he replied grimly, checking his revolver. "Luke, there are 3 of them," Bethany protested. "At least let me help." He hesitated, then nodded. "Can you ride?" "Yes, my father taught me." "Take the horse," he instructed. "Ride to the ranch house. It's about 2 miles that way. Follow the creek. Find my foreman, Hector. Tell him what's happening. He'll bring help." Bethany nodded, fear and determination warring within her. "Be careful." Luke squeezed her hand briefly. "I will now go." Bethany mounted the stallion and set off at a gallop, following the winding creek as instructed. Her heart pounded with fear for Luke, facing 3 armed men alone. She urged the horse faster, leaning low over its neck. The ranch house appeared on the horizon, a substantial 2-story structure surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. As she approached, several men emerged with rifles, alerted by the sound of hooves. "Who goes there?" a tall Mexican man called out. "Are you Hector?" Bethany shouted, reining the horse to a stop. "Luke sent me. Sheriff Daniels and 2 others are burning the line shack. Luke's there alone." Hector's expression hardened. "Mount up," he yelled to the other men. Within minutes, 5 riders galloped toward the burning shack, with Bethany leading the way. When they arrived, the scene was chaos. The shack was fully engulfed in flames, and gunfire echoed across the valley. Luke had taken position behind a fallen tree and was exchanging shots with Daniels and his men, who were sheltered behind their horses. Hector immediately organized his men, spreading them out to flank Daniels' position. Bethany, ignoring Luke's earlier instructions, dismounted and grabbed the spare revolver from the saddlebag. Crouching low, she worked her way toward Luke, using the rocks for cover. When she reached him, his face registered shock and anger. "I told you to stay at the ranch." "I brought help," she retorted, nodding toward Hector and his men, who were now closing in on the sheriff's position. Luke's expression softened slightly. "You're either the bravest or the most foolish woman I've ever met." A bullet splintered the wood near Bethany's head, and Luke pulled her closer, shielding her with his body. "Daniels," Luke shouted, "this ends now. You're trespassing on my land." "You're a wanted man, Reynolds," Daniels called back. "I'm here to bring you in." "My pardon was signed by the territorial governor," Luke replied. "You know that." "I know you're a murderer," Daniels spat. "No piece of paper changes that." Bethany looked at Luke, her eyes questioning. He met her gaze steadily. "My first night in jail, Daniel's brother tried to kill me," he explained quietly. "It was self-defense, but Daniels never believed it." "Surrender now, Reynolds," Daniels shouted, "or we burn the whole ranch down." Luke's jaw tightened. "There are women and children at my ranch, Daniels." "Is that who you are now? A man who threatens innocence?" The sheriff's only response was another volley of gunfire. Hector and his men were now in position, and at a signal from Luke, they opened fire. The crossfire quickly overwhelmed Daniels and his companions. One of the men fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The other threw down his gun in surrender. Only Daniels continued firing, even as his position became untenable. With a cry of rage, he broke cover and charged toward Luke's position, gun blazing. Time seemed to slow for Bethany. She saw Luke raise his revolver, saw his finger tighten on the trigger. But then he hesitated, adjusting his aim at the last moment. His shot caught Daniels in the leg rather than the chest, dropping the sheriff to the ground. Luke was on him in an instant, kicking away his gun and pinning him down. "It's over, Daniels," he said firmly. "I'm not going to kill you, though God knows you deserve it." Daniels glared up at him, hatred burning in his eyes. "You should have killed me when you had the chance, Reynolds." "That's not who I am anymore," Luke replied evenly. He looked up at Hector. "Tie them up. We're taking them to the marshal in Silverdale." As Hector and his men secured the prisoners, Luke returned to Bethany, who was still crouching behind the fallen tree. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the revolver. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her. She shook her head. "You could have killed him." "Yes," Luke agreed. "But then I'd be the man he thinks I am. I've worked too hard to change." Bethany looked into his eyes, seeing the conflict and resolution there. "You're a good man, Luke Reynolds." "I'm trying to be," he replied softly. Without warning, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "When I saw you coming back here, my heart nearly stopped. If anything had happened to you." Bethany's arms slipped around his waist. "I couldn't leave you to face them alone." Luke drew back slightly, his eyes searching her face. "Bethany Crawford, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever known." Before she could respond, he lowered his head and kissed her. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, a question rather than a demand. Bethany answered by sliding her hands up to his shoulders, drawing him closer. The sound of approaching footsteps broke them apart. Hector stood a respectful distance away, his expression carefully neutral. "The prisoners are secured, Patron. We're ready to ride." Luke nodded, helping Bethany to her feet. "We'll take them to Silverdale immediately. Send someone ahead to alert the marshal." The ride to Silverdale took less than 2 hours. The marshal, a grizzled veteran named Harker, listened to Luke's account of Daniel's vendetta with growing concern. "I'll send a wire to the territorial governor," he promised. "Daniels won't be wearing a badge again. That's for certain." As they stepped out of the marshal's office, the sun was setting over the bustling town of Silverdale. Unlike Willow Creek, it was a growing community with proper businesses lining the main street. Bethany noted the schoolhouse at the end of town, a new, well-constructed building that spoke of the town's commitment to education. "What will you do now?" Luke asked as they walked toward the hotel. Bethany gazed at the schoolhouse. "I'll inquire about the teaching position tomorrow. If it's still available. And if it's not," she turned to him, her green eyes determined. "Then I'll find another way to be useful. I won't let anyone tell me I'm worthless again." Luke smiled, taking her hand in his. "I have no doubt of that." They paused in front of the hotel. Propriety dictated they should part ways now, Bethany to take a room at the hotel, Luke to return to his ranch, but neither moved to separate. "Come to dinner at my ranch tomorrow," Luke said suddenly. "I want you to see it properly, not just in a crisis." Bethany hesitated. "That would be improper. Hector's wife will be there," Luke assured her, "and their children. It would be completely respectable." After a moment, Bethany nodded. "I'd like that." True to his word, Luke sent a carriage for her the following evening. Bethany had spent the day inquiring about the teaching position, only to learn it had been filled just days before. Disappointment weighed heavily on her as she traveled to Luke's ranch. Her mood lifted as the carriage crested a hill, revealing the full extent of the Reynolds ranch. Lush pastures stretched in all directions, dotted with healthy cattle. The ranch house was impressive but welcoming, with a wide porch and warm light spilling from the windows. Several smaller houses clustered nearby, home to the ranch hands and their families. Luke waited on the porch, freshly shaven and dressed in clean clothes. His smile when he saw her made Bethany's heart skip a beat. "Welcome to Raven Ridge Ranch," he said, helping her from the carriage. "It's beautiful," Bethany replied sincerely. "You've built something wonderful here." "I had help," Luke said, gesturing to Hector and his wife, Maria, who emerged from the house. "I couldn't have done it without good people." Dinner was a lively affair, with Hector and Maria's children adding youthful energy to the conversation. Bethany noticed how at ease Luke was with them, ruffling the boys' hair and complimenting the girls' drawings. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it warmed her heart. After dinner, Luke invited Bethany to tour the grounds. The night was clear, with a million stars twinkling overhead as they walked toward the newly constructed stable. "Hector tells me you were asking about schools in Silverdale," Luke said casually. Bethany nodded. "The position has been filled. I'll need to look elsewhere." Luke stopped, turning to face her. "Or you could stay here." Bethany blinked in confusion. "At your ranch." "As what?" "As my wife," Luke said simply. Her mouth dropped open in shock. "Luke, we barely know each other." "I know enough," he replied, taking her hands in his. "I know you're brave and principled and kind. I know you fight for what's right, no matter the cost. And I know that in 3 days you've come to mean more to me than anyone has in years." Bethany's heart raced. "This is madness." "Is it?" Luke's blue eyes were earnest in the moonlight. "Bethany, when they called you useless in Willow Creek, they were fools. I've spent my life proving people wrong about me, and I want to spend the rest of it helping you prove them wrong about you." "How would I do that as your wife?" she asked, still dazed by his proposal. Luke smiled. "There are 20 children on this ranch with no teacher. The nearest school is in town, too far for daily travel. You could build something here, a school for my workers' children, for neighboring ranches. Education that's available to everyone, regardless of background or wealth. Everything you fought for in Willow Creek you could create here." Tears sprang to Bethany's eyes as the possibilities unfolded before her. "You would do that, support a school on your land." "I would do anything to see you happy," Luke said softly, "and to keep you by my side. But marriage—" So quickly, Luke released one of her hands to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "I don't expect an answer tonight. Take time to think about it. Get to know the ranch, the people. See if this is a place you could call home." Bethany gazed up at him, this complicated man who had saved her in more ways than one. "And if I say yes?" The hope that blazed in Luke's eyes took her breath away. "Then I'll spend every day making sure you never regret it." Over the next 2 weeks, Bethany immersed herself in ranch life. She met the families, spoke with the children, and began informal lessons under a sprawling oak tree. Each day, her vision for what the school could be grew clearer. And each evening she found herself drawn more deeply into conversation with Luke, learning his past, his dreams, his heart. On a golden afternoon 18 days after her arrival, Bethany sat with Luke on the porch, watching the sun set over their land. "I've made my decision," she said quietly. Luke turned to her, his expression carefully controlled. And Bethany smiled, reaching for his hand. "Yes, Luke Reynolds, I will marry you." The joy that transformed his face was answer enough to any lingering doubts. As he gathered her into his arms, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged, not as a woman deemed useless, but as a partner to a man who had helped her prove them all wrong. 3 months later, they were married in the newly built schoolhouse on Raven Ridge Ranch, surrounded by friends and students. As they exchanged vows, Bethany thought of how far she had come from that desperate morning in Willow Creek. "I love you," Luke whispered as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "My brave, useful wife," Bethany smiled through happy tears. "And I love you, my cowboy who kept his promise." Together, they had created something neither could have built alone: a home, a school, and a love that defied all expectations. In each other they had found not just acceptance, but celebration of the very qualities others had dismissed. And in that, they had both finally found home,